Go.
Streaming from South Africa to the world. This is the Stonks Go Moon podcast. What just happened? We break it down so you don't have to.
Welcome everyone to the Stonks Go Moon podcast. Oil is volatile, crypto is unpredictable, but what happens when you combine the stability of energy markets with the agility of blockchain? While the rest of the industry speculates on meme coins, one company is drilling into something real. Literally, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today, David Rademacher, co-founder of OilX Coin. Welcome to the pod.
Thanks very much for having me.
So first of all, OilX Coin, is that a one word or is it oil meets coin like we say in crypto?
Yeah, that's good question. You're not far off. I mean, at the end of the day, our initial focus is definitely the commodity of oil and gas. It's been around for a long time, and the coin piece, as you can imagine, on the end. So I'll let you use your imagination of what could happen to the first part of the sentence as time goes by. But our initial
I started off this podcast by being almost right. Being in the off air, I said, "Why is your surname German? But you sound American, and you're actually Canadian." So I'm sorry if I caused any offense during this turbulent times. But I'm going to try and become more and more accurate as this podcast progresses. But I can't promise anything. Okay, so let's start with the obvious, right? OilX Coin is building a bridge between crypto and crude. Okay, let's just call it crude for now because there's gas and stuff as well. But what does it actually mean to tokenize an oil reserve? Because it's an old-ish concept, but it's only now starting to become into fruition. So what exactly does that mean?
Well, perhaps I'll start with what's different because exactly as you said, the principle of tokenization, and I'll take a lot of the stable coins out there is what they actually do is one-to-one. They tokenize a specific asset, and that's what basically creates the value of the token. Mm-hmm. And it's a differentiating factor for us is that we take, without getting into too much of the lingo, we take the upstream as well. So at the end of the day, it's not just the asset backing at the end. We actually, with a partner, we don't do that ourselves, with a partner, we go in and we produce the oil itself, and then it's actually sold on to refineries. So the big point here is it's not just a straight peg, for lack of a better way of putting it. We actually take that piece on top, and that's, as I said, what makes this a little bit more different than some of the other models that are out there right now.
Yeah, so very interesting for me because I spent and still spend 20 years in the oil industry, but downstream. So upstream isn't really my sort of thing. So I understand the downstream, but I catch and I exactly understand what you're talking about. So the process of getting regulated, this isn't like a meme coin where I start a coin on Solana or one of these platforms and it's a pump and dump. So you actually have to go through a regulator, which is, help me if I'm wrong, it's the Financial Market Authority, FMA. Is that like the SEC of America?
Yeah, you can. It's a regulator like the SEC. You can call it that.
Okay.
And they're based at a Liechtenstein.
And was that a difficult process to get registered or for this venture?
Well, let's put it this way. I looked about 40 years younger before I started.
You mean you had a lot of hair before you started? And
I had hair. It wasn't white. I looked like you. Honestly, I had a nice full colored beard, and I was youth itself. No, all jokes aside, it is, as you opened up the question, it is an incredibly different situation to, using something like Pump Fund and whatnot, where basically you push across a low number of thousands of USD, and you've inside of a week you've got a token, or probably inside of 48 hours. I don't know exactly, but you know what I'm saying. It's out there. You pick a video or you pick an image, and away you go. And this is pretty much the polar opposite of that, with all negatives and advantages too. I mean, it's always a double-sided coin. The regulatory process is challenging for a bunch of reasons, and one of them, and you just asked that question too, SEC, FMA. One of the big points is it's not normed. It's not like all regulators tick the same, and it's definitely not the case that if this regulator says yes, all the others say yes. Uh-huh. There's some exceptions, and maybe we'll come to that on the Liechtenstein piece. But at the end of the day, it's we take Dubai, for example, or Switzerland, Singapore. There's different regions that have been pretty proactive about it. There's other ones that are much more conservative. So the big point you have right off the bat before you even deal with your FMA is to decide how you're going to even position your token out there. Because again, you have to go through this process with very few exceptions with every single regulator. And that means it's, as I said, it's a magnitude X to just creating a token and putting it onto the market and letting happen what happens. So here's a couple of pieces. I said good and bad. First of all, as you can imagine, your legal costs are not particularly low without going into any details.
Yeah.
The second point is, on the other side is, of course, if you do go into the space, the level of commitment that you need to have as a team, both from a capital and a patience perspective, because, you just mentioned that too around the pump and dump situations.
Yes.
There's no going to a security and then leaving 3 days later after you've brought the token onto the market, because it just does not
work that way. That doesn't work that way.
So, as I said, that's a positive thing because there's a lot of take a mantra of the situation on the weekend. Don't know the details of that, so I'm not even going to jump in there.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this is one of these pieces. Is if you do have to jump through these regulatory hoops, there's no 100% in life, but you can at least make the assumption that the team that's working on this has a very high level of commitment. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so you talked about a team and you've spoken about lowering that investor risk. So how do you avoid those pitfalls? And actually what I'm asking is, who is your team? What sort of background do you have in this? Or are you coming from the outside in, or are you coming from the inside and now putting a token out? What's that situation like?
We're a mix, because I think that's the only way to do it in something like this, because I'll talk on your downstream experience there. Obviously, you don't have anybody who understands the downstream, or the crude at the end of the day. You can't back a token with that. Likewise, you can't tokenize anything or bring a crypto onto the market if you don't understand that side. And then you have the glue in between that somehow or other you have to understand how to found a business and then scale it, market it, et cetera, et cetera. So there's your sum together question. Is basically we bring people into the game that cover all three of those key points. You need your finances, you need this, that, and the rest of it. There's other pieces as well, but those are the key points that we needed to cover. And I mentioned that early on. We're not doing the oil extraction itself. We're working with local partners, and that's what they do day in, day out. But you need to have the ability to make the right decisions. Who do you go with? How do you vet them? Choose the right leases, et cetera, et cetera. So there's still a big oil and gas piece in there. It's not operational because we're more of a financer, if you like. But at the end of the day, you need to have that. And then on the crypto side, as you can imagine, we've done our own token. It's an ERC20, but nonetheless, we've done that piece as well. So basically, we cover that whole spectrum. But
usually, that extraction, that part that you're talking about, is done by big oil, the oil majors, right? And now, how's that? That sounds to me that's a complicated process going sort of as a independent and a private entity into that space. It sort of makes me think about the cocoa industry, where there is a lot of it's a lot of pirates out there, if I could put it like that. So it's like
I'm with you.
Yeah.
And again, this is probably the downstream view on it, which is really interesting to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
Because downstream is big players, right?
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. On the upstream side, exploration, the whole 9 yards, there's huge players in there as well. But if you take the U.S., for example, and that's where primary focus of where we're picking up or intending to pick up our oil and gas leases, it's the long tail principle to use that concept. So there's a lot of oil and gas leases that are small to mid-size, where the big players, for economies of scale, et cetera, they don't even look at them. And I don't mean that negatively or positively. It's just at the end of the day, it's the nature of the beast. So what happens is, again, this is a bit of a unique point on the U.S. side, is most a lot of other countries, if you're a private individual, you own what's under the ground as well. You don't just own the surface, you own underneath. So this means there's honestly a lot of oil and gas owners. You may be using it as a cattle ranch or whatever it happens to be, or open field. and they don't have the capital to go in and start tapping into this. So this is where we come in, if you like, as a financer, and that's why we don't even get in the way of any big boys out there, because what we do is we come in, we're a financer, we make a deal, and there's different kinds of deals that you can do there with that local owner. So again, these are mid to small size things. We're not talking about massive off the coast of Guyana, 50 billion barrels of oil. We're not going to jump into that. And then what you do is you have all kinds of very talented companies that go in and do the production. Again, it's not just the big ones, but these smaller and mid-sized ones. There's loads and loads and loads of them. And that's where we've got very, very good connections into our head of oil and gas. And that's what we do. So we vetted a couple of those guys. We've got a short list anyhow, as you can imagine. And then you literally produce on that specific site. You drill more out, et cetera, et cetera. Depends on the constellation. But long answer to a simple question. No, we don't even get in the hair of the oil of the big players out there. We're looking at the mid to long end of the tail. Let's call it that.
That's so cool. There's a lot of noise about tokenizing real world assets, sort of like a buzzword. Why do you think oil and gas is the right entry point, especially when it comes to crypto?
Yeah, and thanks for grabbing the word entry, and that's how we like to see ourselves too, as an entry token.
You see, I promised you I would get there. I was
Listen, 100 points. 100 points.
Yeah, okay, cool.
It's exactly that word entry, I think, which hits it home, because if you think about oil and gas, it's definitely been around for a few centuries now, and we're going to go out on a limb here and say that oil and gas is going to be around for a lot longer. Now, there's different applications for oil and gas, and you being on the downstream side in the past will know that. So, it doesn't all have to be this side or that side. There's medical instruments, there's plastic compounds, there's all kinds of different things that one needs oil and gas for that have absolutely nothing to do with whether or not you drive your car, using a battery or using fuel. By the way, the car is actually made primarily, through all the plastics and so forth, out of oil and gas byproducts.
So don't come here with your facts and your logic. We don't want to hear it.
Exactly, you got it. You got the storyline. You have the narrative.
Buy the narrative, sell the facts. Sound a bit like okay. We'll edit that part out, maybe. But
that's it. To finish up on your question, that's why, because it's a tried and trusted commodity up there. You take gold, you take oil and gas, and you can
since the dinosaurs. Yeah, basically.
That's it. So, and it's also, I'll say it that if you take out the big tech companies who are very volatile right now, which companies on the planet have the highest market capitalization? So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, obviously, the business model can't be all that bad if it's, if they're fairly well representative. So here you go on your, again, a long answer to a very simple question, is we see it as a tried and trusted. People know what it is, because a lot of things that people invest in nowadays, they don't. And entry token piece around that is, if you aren't in the crypto space yet and you're looking to come in, and by the way, endorsement, or not endorsement, but disclaimer, I own Bitcoin, I own Ethereum, you listed, I probably got a couple kind of idea. But the moral of the story is if you're new to the crypto space completely, then having a real world asset backing, first of all, takes a little bit, I don't even want to call it, let's even leave the natural risk off of it, but just say the psychological aspect of it, that I know at least 50% of what I'm getting into. I may not understand that crypto piece and its ins and outs just yet, but I get oil and gas, and I know it's got a value, and I know it's going to very likely continue to have a value. So keyword entry, 100 points again. That's what we see as being very good because of all those reasons, and that's why we've figured out and we've got traction already in that oil and gas space. People are clicking, like yourself on the downstream side, and saying, hey, that makes sense.
That does make sense. So that's, when did you launch your token?
We haven't yet. So we're actually starting with our ICO next week, and that's why big times ahead. No, but what we do have is let's call it for regulatory reasons, I won't go into details here. We have a pre-financing digital asset that we were able to very clearly test the market with, and we did over $1.5 million in sales on that. So you
just sort of dipped the toes in to see, hey, what's the feeling here? And okay, cool, people are nibbling on toes, so there's something here.
And two birds with one stone, you're spot on. As you know, founding a startup, you always want to have proof as opposed to a belief, because that's much better. And the second thing is that, as I kind of hinted at before, the legal fees, among other points, of getting a token actually through the regulatory process and whatnot, you've got to be able to finance that. And that's the other reason, is we used it, of course, as a financing instrument as well. So it wasn't just a test balloon; it was also our way to get where we are now.
So obviously, as an investor, your exposure would be to the token, and that would give you access to everything that you're doing. What is your long-term vision here? Is it to expand into other energy markets? Because let me tell you, if there's uptake in oil and gas, there are a multitude of products out there that you can apply the same methodology and fundamentals to and exploit in the same way.
Yep, and that's why your very, very first question about the oil, the X, and the coin was already 100 points to begin the podcast, because exactly that's the principle. You can swap out the oil, of course, for other commodities at the end of the day. Having said that, as I said, you started off running, but having said that, I think, again, being somebody who's, this is my first startup, I think it's really important to focus. So, you can always start to chase shiny things like the Magpie does. And I think it's such a big opportunity, and there's so much to be done. And as I said, we're already in one of the biggest commodities out there. So sure, you can double up and go on farther. But my personal opinion is, let's focus, let's get this right. Let's grow it, let's scale it, and then, if we get bored, we can start looking left and right.
No, you'll never get bored in oil. Tell me, okay, so is that what you want to accomplish for this year? Get the token, scale, start, build. Is that the focus for this year?
Yeah, and toss a year on top of that, as I said, because I'm a realist and not. And I said it's a long game for us. We're not in for the pump or the dump or the whatever. Is getting things like this, and again, I'll keep tickling you on your downstream side. Yeah. Oil and gas isn't something that happens like that, right? You acquire the lease, you've got to build the lease out, depending on how it's set up, et cetera. But that's part of our principle as well. We have some access to some pretty interesting technologies in order to increase the production, et cetera. So, a long story short, the oil and gas situation is a long game. It's a mid to long-term game, right? That's why they play with 10-year averages, and they don't take spot prices when you do business cases, et cetera. So with this, you're still 100% of what you said. That is our focus for this year. But as I said, you can easily tack on a year or two to that, because we need to do this right. Yeah, and getting these leases done, getting the revenues up, et cetera. So it's something that doesn't happen overnight.
No. So I was speaking to a pragmatist in the blockchain space. It doesn't happen very often. Maybe 1 out of 10 people, well, 2 out of 10, you being one, and there maybe being another one.
You and me, that's it.
Well, it's seemingly, because everyone wants to invest in something, and then it goes boom, goes moon, and then it goes, and I'm like, oh, luckily I got out of top, and I feel like this isn't that way. So there needs to be some sort of traditional expectation management, because that's in downstream. That's all about expectation management, managing expectations, and are you guys actively? Have you done that? Are you still planning on doing that, or?
No, exactly that. And you can imagine, so let's come from the Web3 side. If you're used to the pump and dump world, and as I said, not meaning this negative in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot of speculative assets out there, and in my opinion, that's fine that they're there. If people want to invest in them, invest in them. So not bad-mouthing them in any way, shape, or form. But generally, Web3 and the investing situation there is a different one. So when you do come in with a longer play, and it's even just simple things, to be honest with you, like listing on CoinMarketCap, what you're asked, the questions you're asked are not set up for our scenario. They're set up for different scenarios. So this is exactly around the principle of what you're talking about, managing expectations. I think towards, the people in the oil and gas kind of things, and the entry people, we've got to manage expectations in that direction. And if we look into the degen world, just to take that, it's the whole other way around to say, look, guys, this is what you want to have. And this is not financial advice, okay?
General market commentary. Yeah.
Absolutely. but this is the sort of thing, and I'm not saying our token, but a token like this is something that one can consider, just like you have some Bitcoin, you've got your, and then you've got higher speculative things. This is a nice mix to have in your pot, so that if the markets all crash or partially crash or whatever it happens to be, you've got, and I think that's the whole positive aspect of the RWA in general, and there's differentiations in there, of course, but that's the thing, is to say, look, put your eggs in different baskets. And the RWA piece, be it oil and gas, be it gold, be it whatever it happens to be it real estate, there's all different kinds of pieces in there. I think that's a very interesting diversification that people can add into their portfolio to make sure that, if that runs that way, then you've still got a couple of other horses in the race. So that's where we're trying to manage expectations there, to say that we're coming from the other spectrum side, but we think
the adults in the room. You're basically the adults in the room.
Did you notice I stumbled for a second there to look for a word, but
I'll say it. I'll say it for you. You don't have to say anything. You're the adults in the room. So before I let you leave, and I don't even know what the question is or supposed to be, but it's just like stuck in my head a nugget about you mentioning Liechtenstein. I was in Liechtenstein once, passing through Germany.
Wow.
And there's not much going. There's not much going on. It's a beautiful town, but there's not much going on. My logic tells me it's more like a financial center, domicile, something like that.
We're actually not domiciled there. We're domiciled in Switzerland. And you'll probably know that.
Just as nice. Just as nice.
Yeah, exactly. A little bigger. Liechtenstein comes in, I think, at 40,000 inhabitants. So it's a village. It's a village in South Africa. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less.
So why Liechtenstein, or what's up? You mentioned it, and okay.
No, it's there's thank God there is logic to it. As I said, we're domiciled in Switzerland, and this is where, coming way back to the beginning, is the situation with regulators. Is just because you're in one doesn't mean you're approved in any other one. So it's very, very fragmented. You mentioned the SEC. The SEC does their own things. Switzerland, the FINMA, does their own thing. In Liechtenstein, it's the FMA. Now, and this is where I can introduce the caveat. They're part of the European Economic Area, the EEA. So this is, if you like, the EU plus a couple of additional countries, one of which is Liechtenstein. So, and if you're in that space and you get the approval, and this is very specific, as I said, to the EEA, or if you like mainland Europe, or however you want to call it, if you get the approval from one of the regulators that is a member state of the EEA, then you can do what's called passporting. And the passporting allows you then to get effectively, the others are notified that an approval exists, and they accept that approval. In layman's terms, yeah. So don't quote me in front of my lawyer, but that's how it works. So the point is here again. You ask simple questions that I give horribly long answers to. Liechtenstein is beside Switzerland, so with that, it's a very easy go-to point to get the. We could have gone to Germany or we could have gone to Austria, but at the end of the day, Liechtenstein is actually it's a good regulator set up there, because it is small, because they are focused, because they are digitally oriented, and because they are interested in tokenization, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a win-win situation from that aspect, because they're kind of, I definitely shouldn't quote me on this, because I'm probably a step on some people's toes, and other people will be happy that I say this, but they kind of sit between literally Austria and Switzerland. So they're half on the EEA, EU side of things, and the other half they're in the Swiss camp, but they're their own thing. So from that perspective, it's a very nice bridge, if you like, between those two worlds. And that meant it was, from us, both from a logistics and also from mentality, et cetera, perspective, it made a lot of sense. So that's why Liechtenstein, and it wasn't for the exoticness of it all.
No, I get it, because now I pass through and it's for a passport. Makes 100% sense. So thank you so much for joining me today. If the listeners want to go and connect with you, find out more about OilX Coin and how they can participate and when it's going to be released and all that nice stuff, which is totally not investment advice, where can they connect with you?
Best thing to do is go to our oilxcoin.io website, and we're of course in X and also in LinkedIn. So catch up there. And maybe a last sentence that people should know about is because we're a security, we just have specific jurisdictions that we can offer our coin in. But as I said, if you go to the site, you can figure all that out. The information's there.
Awesome. And we'll put all the links in the comments and maybe some memes. We'll see how it goes. Thank you so much for joining me today. And to our listeners, peace, love, and prosperity. I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.
A plan's been written for me, and I'm not saying I believe that it's you, but I'm also not saying that it's not. What if the cosmos knows those that don't know themselves? What if the carbon particles that make us up can be dispelled? What if we're all one consciousness though? What if we're all just lost in the cosmos? Lost in the cosmos. Lost in the cosmos. Cosmos. I still believe that we're all here to play a part. I still believe that you and me were meant to be from the start. I'm not saying I believe that it's you, but I'm also not saying that it's not. And I'm not saying I believe that it's you, but I'm also not saying that it's not. What if the cosmos knows those that don't know themselves? What if the carbon particles that make us up can be dispelled? What if we're all one consciousness though? What if we're all just lost in the cosmos? Lost in the cosmos. Lost in the cosmos. Cosmos. Lost in the cosmos. Lost in the cosmos. I still believe that we're all just lost, trying to find our way and make sense of the plot. But I guess who really knows though? Well, I suppose the cosmos.